Blog Talk Radio.
The following broadcast is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network.
Golf Talk Live is sponsored by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. Here's Andrew to tell you more about our sponsors.
iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. And Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, including reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top teaching professionals, all designed to help you improve from tee to green. Welcome to Golf Talk Live with your host, Ted Odorico. Join Ted each week as he speaks with some of the best in golf. This week's special guest will join us a bit later. But first up is another great discussion on Coach's Corner. So let's introduce tonight's Coach's Corner panel.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome live to Golf Talk Live. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. We've got a great show for you as we get close to the end of June. It's hard to believe that we're almost put the month of June behind us, and in fact, next Thursday will be July 1st. So we're coming up to a new month here before too long. But thank you, everybody, for joining me. We're going to introduce the Coach's Corner panel here in just a second. And then a little bit later on, I'm going to be joined from the UK by my very special guest, John Taylor. He's a performance psychology expert and Zen Golf associate. And he's been on the show before. He was on last year, and he's got some new things he wants to talk about. So he's coming back on. He's calling from the wee hours of the morning, if you will, from the UK. So he's staying up extra late for just you guys. So I hope you'll stay up with him. But let me introduce the panel, and we'll get going on tonight's discussion here in Coach's Corner. All right, first up is good friend Tim Kramer. He is a visionary peak performance mind coach and president and founder of Peak Performance Mind Coaching, a program utilizing innovative and pioneering mind coaching techniques. He's also a contributing editor with Golf Tips Magazine. Also on the panel tonight is another good friend, Clint Wright, a 30-year member of the PGA and one of the partners at TGM Golf, who are a big proponent of the R3 approach. He's considered to be among the best covering the short game today and also a favorite panelist here on Coach's Corner. So, guys, welcome to Coach's Corner here on Golf Talk Live.
I'm glad to be here, Ted.
Good evening.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, guys, and as always, thank you for giving of your time. So we're going to talk about this past Tuesday. Cindy and I talked a little bit about the conversation that we're going to have tonight. We're going to get into it a little bit more in depth, of course, because we have more time to carry the conversation, if you will. We're going to talk about building confidence. This is an area that we see a lot of amateurs struggle with, gaining that confidence out there and not really knowing what to do. And you know, I want to just go back to something that her and I talked about real briefly, and that was the U.S. Open that just happened. You know, John Rahm, of course, ended up being the ultimate winner of the event. And I want to get your thoughts on this because, and I'm going to sort of lay this out, and then I want to get each of you to sort of respond or comment what you think of what I'm about to say, and then we'll get into the general conversation. You know, it was interesting because the week before at the Memorial, of course, as we all know, he was removed from the tournament as a result of testing positive for COVID, which, of course, under the PGA rules currently, it's an automatic DQ. And so he was quite unhappy, obviously, with the event as we all witnessed. But what's interesting about it is from week to week, he didn't lose his confidence. And I say that because even though he was leading the tournament at the Memorial by, I believe, 6 shots at the time, that would certainly knock the wind out of anybody's sails, I think. And for him to come into the U.S. Open and play as well as he did, particularly on Sunday, I think says a lot to the level of confidence that he has in his game and being able to bring it forward and ultimately winning a major event. Tim, I'm going to start with you and get your thoughts on that, and then Clint, as you as well.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a great testament to what he did and certainly coming back and everything like that. The only thing that I'm going to throw out, though, is that one of the huge principles that we talk about and teach through peak performance mind coaching is we want players to be confident in spite of results, not because of them. So they're bringing a strong, empowered, confident them to the game, rather than waiting for performance to dictate their level of confidence. It really isn't kind of like the chicken and the egg, which came first, confidence or results. It's my firm contention that we have to bring, again, a very strong us to the game. And when we do that, that's when it really shines. So I got to say that, yeah, I think that he's obviously playing well. He maybe had a chip on his shoulder. It doesn't really matter. He came out, he did what he needed to do, and he appeared to be very confident. But the other thing that I would say in watching some of the Open, I didn't get to see it all, but he seemed to have very good control of his emotions this time, the entire tournament. And he has a tendency, as we've seen, to implode or explode quite frequently and for whatever reason. So I'm going to suggest maybe that, his mind state was, he was in a great state of mind, in my opinion, that led him to perform the way he did.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, obviously these guys are playing, Clint, at the highest level of the game. And, as Tim said, you have to sort of come with that confidence. And obviously throughout their earlier parts of their careers, they're developing that confidence through their play and so forth. So I agree with what he said. But I want to get your thoughts. What do you think about that? Because that had to be a big blow. I mean, here you are leading a tournament by quite a margin. And all of a sudden, the guy wheels up in the cart and says, come on, you got to come with us. You've tested positive. And unfortunately, you're out of the tournament.
Right.
That's got to set a little bit of a negative tone in anybody, even the most confident. What are your thoughts with what transpired from Memorial to?
I don't think it does. I really don't. I think if you look at it, he come out. I almost want to say that what happened at the Memorial set the table for him to win the U.S. Open. Mm-hmm. Because what happened there is he came off of a dominating 3 days of golf. He had a 6-shot lead against arguably one of the toughest fields on tour. A 6-shot lead. And what happened, he had absolutely no control over. Cut and dried. You tested positive. Here's the rules. This is what's got to happen. Okay. They basically don't disqualify them. It's a withdrawal. Okay.
Right.
So works the same way. But I think that he could have come out the next day and had a terrible round of golf and lost the golf tournament. But he didn't. He didn't have an opportunity to either win it or lose it. I think what you saw there is he came off of 3 days of dominating the same players he played against at Torrey Pines. He knew he could beat them, okay? And he went out and improved that. So I'm not so sure it was a negative blow to his confidence. I think it was a negative blow to his checkbook. But there's no question that he left there, he left there on a 3-day roll. And we all know these guys get on a roll and get it going. They can go low days and days and days in a row. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I think Tim may be right. I think he showed that there was a slight bit of chip on his shoulder, but the U.S. Open fits his demeanor. I think you see in the past when he gets a little upset or loses his temper, it's in a tournament where he knows he's got to shoot 10 to 20 below, under to win the golf tournament. U.S. Open, we all know, you shoot 5 or 6 under, you're in the hunt. So a bogey here and a bogey there really is not quite as dramatic as it might be in just a regular tour event. I think at the end of the day there you saw a guy that says, I'm good enough to give myself a chance to win, and 2 times in a row on 17, 18, his chance went in. And so I was really excited for him. I think he's, if you listen to the interview after the tournament, this guy's got his head on straight right now. I mean, right. I think he really does, and if he is matured to the level that we saw there, he's going to be hard to handle for a lot of years.
Yeah.
So I just don't think that the thing at Memorial really put him in a negative tone. I think it put him into a positive tone to move into the U.S. Open, and it turned out for him.
Yeah. It's interesting, some of the comments that you both made. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Seve Ballesteros. Was a little bit like that. He had, and I won't say so much a chip, but he had a certain tone at times about him as well. And, obviously everything doesn't always go their way. And I think, I would say a lot of passion in both demeanors.
Sure.
And I think that propels them, even, I can remember over the years, as an example, at Ryder Cups and that, if the Europeans weren't doing well, especially when Seve was well entrenched, and that seemed to fire him up even more. And, if somebody wasn't doing well or somebody was, and I don't mean because of their own fault, but just things weren't going their way, Seve would be right there, and he would be, he would just be grinding even that much more. And there was a lot of passion to come out. And I think Jon Rahm is going to be very much a lot like that. Certainly not exactly the same, but I think it's just something, maybe it's cultural for them, to have a lot of passion, because Seve certainly did, and we saw that over the years. And it'd be interesting to see if John does the same thing. All right, so we're going to get into our general discussion here. And first off, I think we need to, Tim, and I'm going to let you answer this one here initially. What happens when a golfer does lose their confidence? What sort of what's happening, do you think, inside that caused them to lose the confidence?
Yeah, bottom line, they're paying too much attention to results, and their focus on the results results in a chipping away at their confidence rather than trusting in their abilities and believing that they're going to come back. So that's kind of why I maintain that some of the best players I've seen and coached, that it's almost like their confidence on a deeper level is temporarily maybe rocked a little bit, but basically unshakable. And they do bounce back quickly. And I loved what Clint had to say about the Memorial and about, Jon Rahm. I too, I'm not sure how much of a chip he had on his shoulder, as much as just kind of like, no, I'm going to move forward here from this. He learned his lesson. It was obviously a very, very costly lesson in a lot of ways, but the good ones always seem to learn their lessons and come back with a higher level of confidence and performance.
Yeah, interesting that you both saw that as well. And, it's going to be interesting. We'll see how things go forward, but I think you're right. I think that, to some now we know as amateur golfers, that would be, we see them having a meltdown over a bad hole or even a bad shot. So something like that, I think, would be, but again, it's a testament to the level of play. We tend to focus, I think, a lot on the players' actual physical abilities of ball striking and that sort of thing. But really, it's what's going on upstairs that really, I think, sets the difference. Because I've seen a lot of great players over the years, Clint, who were phenomenal ball strikers, could hit the ball, 6 ways from Sunday. But when they'd get out there and have to perform out in the golf course, suddenly things, just didn't seem to gel very nicely together.
Right.
So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to help build a golfer's confidence. So I've got some things here that we're going to talk about, and I think one, and I'm going to throw this to you, Clint, is preparation. Build it and it will come, as they say. Talk about preparation. It's a secure feeling, obviously, on the first tee. You're going to put, you've put the work and effort into each part of your game to deal with the shots that you're going to need. But what do we need as far as preparation? How can our preparation, and what are some of the things that we can do that is going to help foster some of that confidence?
Yeah, well, that's a complicated question, obviously. But, you made a point. I take this a little deeper. You know me, all right? I take the deal with confidence a little deeper than that. I believe there's two steps beyond that, and Tim mentioned it. Is it, to me, confidence then builds trust that builds faith. You know, and what I mean by that, and I think this is part of the preparation, you have to have definition, you have to understand what you're trying to accomplish. See, to me, confidence is that I've decided the best club to hit. I've got the right shot. I can do this. I've done it enough times. I know that I'm confident this club is going to be good. Then I've got to trust that, but then the most important thing is I have to believe I can do it right now. Not yesterday, not 2 days from now, but right now. So to me, it builds onto that. And you made a great point. When I was coaching collegiately, I'd have parents come in, what do you think about my kid? I said, well, he's a great hitter, but I'm not sure how good a player he is. There's a vast difference between being a good hitter and a good player. And because we've all seen good players that may not hit it that great, but they knew how to play. So when I start getting ready or taking a student says, okay, how are we going to play? That's part of that preparation. Not how I'm going to hit it today, but how am I going to attack this course? How am I going to play? What clubs am I going to use? And then stick with a semi-plan of how I intend to play golf today. You know, I'm not hitting the ball really good today. Maybe I'm a little bit off on my ball striking. So then maybe I'm going to take an extra club and choke down on it all day today. How am I going to play? How am I going to get as much out of what I'm doing today as I can? And we talk with people a lot about the third shot. How am I going to get to that third shot today? Preparing myself and be realistic. I think that's the key to taking it to the course today is that be realistic about where you're at this particular moment in your ball striking and your ability to move the ball forward. If you're struggling a little bit, the way you're going to play may be a little different than if you really feel good about how you're striking the ball. But it really comes down to what I do personally is that I know I can make a good golf swing. It's available to me, no matter when and where, but my best swing's available. So what I try to do, and I think it's kind of a catchy thing now that people are talking about, is that I just try to take the tension out of my body and make a move. Here's how I'm going to play today. I can't force it down the fairway. I have to hit it down the fairway. So how am I going to, at this moment, be able to get my body prepared to make the best swing I can right now? And that takes a little bit of training beforehand. And I like him, it's not about results. It's about can I achieve my intention? Okay? What is my intention today? And what am my intention to do on this swing? I intend to aim properly. I intend to relax and take the tension out and make my swing. That's the only intention I can have. I can't intend to hit it on the green. I can't control that. But I can control what I intend to do with my body and the feel that I'm going to have. So in preparing to get that to the course, I have to work on that on the practice tee. I have to practice that as much as I practice how to hit an 8-iron because that's all part of it when I'm playing. So preparing is practicing those things on the range just like you'd practice, staying down on the ball or watching your rhythm or whatever. So you just can't automatically go up to the first tee box and turn the switch. You have to prepare
exactly.
well in advance of being able to do that.
Some great points there as well. And Tim, I think you also you have to be proactive as opposed to reactive, and allowing a lot of these great experiences that you've had in the game to be part of the foundation of your confidence, and deciding that temporary low points in your game will pass quickly and not dwell on those. And that they will not have an impact on that foundation. So as Clint says, you're going out there and you're practicing not just specific areas of your game, but different feelings and so forth. But you've got to be proactive as opposed to reactive as well. I think that you've got to do that. So maybe you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, we know the way the mind works is that in every moment you're either focused on wanted or unwanted. it's been my experience that most players focus on the unwanted and the bad things that could happen or the bad things that did happen, and they project those right into the future, and they're already toast. I mean, there's not a lot of good energy coming out of that. So I couldn't agree more that, that again, that we really have to use the mind in our favor, and I think that's a missing art. We've gotten so fixated on focusing on what is which I jokingly call what is-itis, that we can't use the mind to imagine and create. And I think, again, guys, that this really drives home the point that I don't think enough players, amateurs, and arguably professionals really work on the mind game as they're practicing, so that they're hitting shots with a high level of belief. I think we go through the motions physically of what we're working on mechanically, but rarely do I see somebody who's also incorporating mind game skills into their practice. Then what tends to happen is that we get out on the course, not having practiced the mind game, and now all of a sudden we're asking for something, or maybe even more pronounced, into a tournament. Never having really practiced mind game skills, and then we're just fighting with ourselves to try and access those states of confidence or calmness or whatever we may want them to be. I'm a huge proponent of having, almost like, in our mind game. We've got 14 clubs that we play with physically, but we better have a bunch of different emotions that we can play with out there. Sometimes it's going to have to be calmness. Sometimes it's going to have to be confidence. Again, love what Clint said. I think it always comes back to belief, and that really what I see in the best players that I coach is that I would dare say every shot that they hit is a reflection of their level of belief in the pre-shot routine, which I believe needs to be incorporated in the routine, that something good is about to happen. But yeah, I think that it's something that we don't do a good enough job of yet in terms of really helping our students to practice the mind game. It's a skill that needs to be developed. It's not something that most players just...
Yeah, equally, again, a great point. And Clint, I think really... to really help build that confidence, I think players need to understand what their strengths are, their limitations and triggers. They need to understand those very well. It's certainly easier to win believing in something you understand versus something you don't. Maybe you can expand a little bit more on that.
Well, it comes down to, like I said a minute ago, you have to be realistic about just how you can play. I mean, I play with guys that are, in our new terms, they're bombers. They hit it down there, and they're hitting wedges in all the par fours, and I'm back there just kind of poking it around, hitting 8-irons. But a lot of times I beat them, because I'm not trying to overplay what I can do.
Right.
I think that I can hit an 8-iron 155 yards every now and then. But I'm realistic enough to know that that's not what's going to happen the majority of the time. And so, if I got to carry it over water at 150 yards, I'm not hitting an 8-iron just because every now and then I could hit it that far. Because I don't need a badge of honor, I need to be able to get it over the water. So I'm going to take my 7-iron and hit it, because I know that my mistake is not going to be short. It's going to be long, if anything. So you have to look at the individual time and frame that you're playing in, but you also have to recognize what you have in your arsenal to play inside that time frame. You have to understand that the wind's in your face and you're this far away. Have confidence and trust that you can hit the shot you've chosen. But you have to be realistic about what you're capable of doing the majority of the time. You hear it on television a lot when these players are having to lay up, where they're laying up to their good number. So they're playing. So I need to get in at 95 yards. That's my best wedge shot. So that's where I want to play to. I get such a chuckle out of these guys I play with that they just want to get it as close to the green as they can. I'm going, well, not necessarily do I want to get it as close to the green as I can every time. I mean,
right.
You're playing out of your strength. Play to your strength. You know, if you hit good 100-yard shots, if you got to hit a 3-iron to get it to 100 yards, get it to 100 yards.
Yep.
And I very rarely see that happening, particularly with amateur players, where they just want it, you know, the idea is to get it as close to the green as you can. And we all know that the best players play from the green back, not from the tee to the green. They play in reverse.
You know, what's interesting that you mentioned that, and not to pick on anybody, but, you know, I think back a little earlier time with the player, of course, we all know Bubba Watson, you know, one of the big bombers on tour. And very early on in his career, it was, you know, very much a John Daly-esque type approach, you know, grip it and rip it, and he'd be the big bomber, and he'd be, you know, right out in front of you know, virtually every green on a par 4. But there came a point in time, and it certainly served him well in certain situations, but in other situations, it was actually to his own detriment. And I think, you know, certainly you want to be a long player. It certainly gives you advantages, but sometimes too long is not good. And ultimately, that's why I believe he went on to win the Masters. I think he recognized that, you know what, yeah, I can hit a long way, but, you know, here at Augusta National, you know, trying to reach every green, you know, on par 4 is not going to serve me well here. So, you know, I think he I hate to say smartened up, but I think he recognized that, you know, sometimes you got to put that club in the bag and play the smart play. And so he understood the limitations and what his strengths are. And
you understand.
I think this is where,
I agree with you.
Yeah. And this is what a lot of amateurs struggle with, is they, you know, as you say, they get out there and they say, well, you know, this is only a 384 yard par 4. It's a short one. So I'm going to pull out the old driver and just lay up short of the green. But they're not factoring in the fact that all the way down the right-hand side is water, and there's some bunkers out there that are pretty tough to contend with around the green. So if they get in that, they put themselves in further trouble. So, again, it goes back to, you know, as we talk about, is the mental side of the game or the mind game, what's the smart play here? And let's play to our strengths and our limitations.
Right, and, you know, not to pick on one of our newest guys, is, you know, I believe that DeChambeau has one of the best short games on tour. And he takes that away from himself so many times, you know, because he won the U.S. Open. He could hit a long way, but he won that Open with his pitching wedge and a putter.
Yep, exactly.
You know,
well,
so,
and
it's hard to...
He had some missteps this past weekend. He had some missteps this past weekend at the U.S. Open for that very reason. Again, you know, he hit some shots that just were not, you know, smart on his play. And, you know, whether it cost him the tournament or not, you know, who's to say? But it certainly it didn't serve him well, in other words. No,
that's correct.
Cool. Clint, I want to come to you, and here's another area that I want to, because we've got to move on here. Sure, no problem. And that is, or sorry, not Clint, Tim. I'm sorry, Tim. Is great coaching. You know, we need to, you know, players need to be matched up with a good coach that is not only going to teach them certain areas of the physical game, but also is going to be there and help them bolster their confidence by believing in them. Just something as simple as believing in them and nurturing that relationship. So that you've got to get matched with a great coach, I think, you know, in order to be able to accomplish these things, because that ultimately as well is going to help towards building your confidence. And I know you know all about coaching, so your thoughts here.
Yeah, well, and I totally agree with that, because and it's a very broad statement, and obviously we certify mind coaches through our program, but the one thing that I'm it's very important to me is that we learn a student's style. What I have seen over the years that I disagree with is when I see a coach who tries to coach the mind game without a lot of the tools in the mind game. And basically what it comes back to in many cases to me is the implication, this is what worked for me and this is what I think will work for you too. I think we need to have a bunch of tools as coaches in our bags for what we do with different kinds of players. We're going to have the swashbuckler types. We're going to have the ones who are calmer, and those really require very different sets of skills so that we're not trying to pigeonhole these players into what we necessarily believe they should do, but that we take enough time with a player, really get to know them, and know how we can make that player shine. In terms of the world of energy that I coach in, it's basically a matter of either bumping it up or bringing it down, so that I'll have a player that is very volatile. And I don't mind that as long as it's channeled emotion, but that's a player that I'm really going to want to try and get into a calmer space more often. Whereas I've also got actually one of my guys on tour, and it's in many cases like, got to put a light a firecracker under him to get him going. So it's a very different energy, but having the skills to really coach both types of players, I believe, is really the art to effectively coaching the mind game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Clint, just to sort of follow up with that.
It is an art.
Oh, I agree, no doubt. And again, there's a lot of great coaches out there, but may not. The mind game may not be their strength, and I think a lot of times they do that part of the game an injustice by trying to sort of, walk through the motions of it. And I think this is where, some coaches that are a little bit more prolific in the mind game can sort of partner up with somebody that's maybe strong in the physical game, and together they can work together with a player.
Oh, absolutely.
In something like that. Clint, I want to follow up sort of, it works sort of hand in hand with coaching, and that is really helping a player create a clear and defined goal plan. So in other words, if you know where you're going and have the step in place to get there, it gives you, again, a sense of security that you're on the right track, and ultimately your confidence. And this is something too, maybe you can touch a little bit on that, is what kind of a plan should we be considering as a player, and how can our coach help us with that? That was for you. Oh, it looks like Clint got dropped off, so I'll hold on that.
Maybe he got upset and hung up.
Yeah, maybe.
Do you want me to take? Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and follow up on that, and I'll get Clint on the next one. Go ahead.
That sounds fine. He's back.
Yeah, drop me some summary. I don't know what the deal was. Your question about goals.
Yeah, did you want me to repeat it, or did you hear everything?
No, I heard that. Just as I was going to start answering it, it dropped on me. No, I think it very much like Tim was talking about, is it's an individual person. And if I'm the instructor there, I need to have a little understanding of where the player thinks they want to go. Mm-hmm. And then try to help them manage the realistic side of goals. I want to be a tour player. I'm 64 years old. That's probably not a realistic goal. But to be able to play my best golf, then I might be able to get to that. Okay? But I need to find the instructor and the golf professional that's willing to help me establish that at the particular time frame I'm at now. And, if you're a beginner, your beginning goals may be just to get the ball on the green in 5 shots or whatever. And then as I progress, I change my goals. I'm not a real big believer in setting a deadline goal. I think you have to do it in phases and stages, because I want to be able to accomplish it as I go. Mm-hmm. So I'm more of a believer in setting the goal, the bar a little bit low, and then particularly and keep rising it up as we go. And I think that the stats will dictate that path for a player. If my goal is to maybe shoot 90, then I have to try to figure out how I'm going to shoot 90. get the ball on every green in 3 shots and 2 putt, I shoot 90. So how do I do that? What part of my game do I need to improve? And once I reach that point, the stats will prove out. Well, for me to go from 90 to 80, then what part of my game based on the stats do I need to improve on to do that? And so I'm really kind of an open-ended, open-mind idea about setting goals because, if you only got a day to play and you want to shoot 90, that's going to be pretty tough. It's going to take a little bit more time and effort to do that. So, I almost get to a point that says, okay, let's start out with a real low goal of getting it on, getting the ball in the air. Let's get it on the green, and let's see where the path leads us, and set our goals based on achievement, not necessarily this way out in the future goal I want to have. Is that let's work on what we're doing now. Let's reset the goal to the next level. What are we doing now? Let's reset the goal to the next level. And it's a process. It's not just a one-time decision that I'm going to make. I think that's the best way to keep a player interested.
Yeah, and
may I add?
Go ahead. Yeah, Tim. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Tim.
Because I love what he is saying right now. We have what we do when we establish goals is we say the goal has to be believable and achievable. So you have to believe that the goal is achievable. Otherwise, you will sabotage it every time. And even in terms of confidence, as so many times, and I think we've touched upon this, but they do bomb it down by the green, and just because it seems good at the time, and then they get down there, and you say, well, were you really confident you could hit the shot? And of course, what are they going to say? Oh yeah, of course, I knew I could hit this. and if you really had them wired, I don't know, to a lie detector or whatever. But if we had their brain wired, I can tell you there's more stress coursing through their bodies than they probably are aware of. So the ability to make good decisions based upon good goals that we actually believe in, that are achievable, to me is the key. And this is where I'm a firm advocate of baby step goals that really feel good. It's almost like when you're going to clean your house or whatever, and you got a checklist. And you find that it really feels good to just check little baby things off the list because it feels like a sense of accomplishment rather than these huge goals that we set for ourselves that, first of all, we never even believed to begin with, and then we get disappointed and frustrated because we're not seeing the evidence and the proof. So I think it's far better to set goals that we love and we tap into and we feel passionate about, and to see those come to life rather than these things that never stood a chance and we weren't really confident about to begin with.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And I think it also goes back to what we just talked about a few moments ago, and that is our strengths and obviously abilities and so forth. As those change and as those improve and develop,
absolutely,
then your goals are going to change. If you're coming out and you're a novice beginning golfer, obviously your goals can't be very lofty. It's nice to say, especially if you're a youngster and say, I want to play on the PGA or the LPGA Tour one day. That's certainly a vision down the road that potentially may or may not happen. But you have to take a look and assess where you are right now. What's your strengths, if any? If you're somebody that's just learning to play the game, well, obviously you don't have necessarily a lot of strengths. You could be very athletic and you might have some ability, but you're not really very developed in the game. So as those strengths and those abilities become more evident as we move along, then your goals can change. So I agree with both of you on that. I think to set definitive goals right from the get-go, certainly some small goals that are attainable, because that, again, it's a reward system. So if you're seeing results, as you're developing various skills and abilities along the way, then those goals, as they start to change, can be a little bit more challenging and what have you. But to just, as you pointed out, Clint, to just sort of set out goals and they're carved in granite, that's just not a smart play. And you're really setting yourself in a lot of cases up for failure because when they're not achievable or they're very, very difficult to achieve, then that's going to chisel away, obviously, at your confidence as well. Tim, I want to come back to you, even though I know you chimed in on the last one. This was one I wanted to give to you, and I know you've talked about this before. Tim, and that is when we talk about the internal dialogue or internal voice, if you will. Your own voice should be the most supportive and creative, positive internal environment.
It better.
And this is why,
exactly.
Right? It should be, and it isn't always there.
No,
maybe you can
not, but
put a few exclamation points along the way, if you will, and talk about that, the importance of internal dialogue.
Yeah, the internal dialogue is everything. And again, in every moment, we're telling ourselves a story that either is a can-do story or I'm probably not going to accomplish it story. I mean, if you really want to boil it down to, and of course, there's gray areas in between, and there's different levels of belief and different levels of confidence, whatever. But the dialogue has to be, we really have to gain, I believe, a very strong sense of awareness of what our dialogue is at in as many moments as we can when we're playing golf, and then arguably throughout our entire day, so that to me, we have to have the ability to know when we're going down the rabbit hole quickly to keep ourselves from going there. And the thing that I always like to coach is that I always ask my students, so how are you out there? How do you deal with frustration? And they'll go, well, I breathe, or I do this, or I do that, and good answers. But really, from an energy perspective, the best way to deal with frustration is long before you ever get frustrated. Because once the momentum, emotion and energy and the mind game, it's a lot like gravity. And once it gets going, you're not going to slow it down anytime soon. So we get back to what you mentioned before, Ted, which is a highly proactive approach. So when we look at the mind game, really have to do it proactively rather than reactively, even from an energy standpoint. Again, once the energy gets going in a not so good direction, we're not going to turn that around anytime quickly. In fact, think about it, but we call it shooting ourselves in the foot, right? Think of how many times, even as players, it's like we're not playing well. And finally, we just it's just like we know we shot ourselves in the foot. It's not going anywhere, and then suddenly we relax into it, and we let go, and the tension goes away. And as Clint said, we start swinging very smoothly again, with some nice soft rhythm and tempo, and all of a sudden we're just right back in the game. But the key to that, again, is, we just can't go to these places hoping to be able to most mind game coaching, in my opinion, still surrounds what do I do when I'm really mad, as opposed to how do I keep from getting really upset. And that's where the mind game kicks in.
Yep. Some great points there. Yeah, I agree. Clint, Ben Hogan famously said years ago that, and he was arguably one of the, many considered him to be the greatest ball striker of all time, depending on who you talk to. But, he felt himself as a level of player that he was at the height of his career, that he maybe hit 5 or 6 shots in a round that were great. Certainly had a lot more misses along the way. And so the problem that I see with a lot of amateurs, and I always equate this to, at an airport, we see everybody lugging their baggage with them to get to the terminal. Obviously, in a flight, you have to do that. But at some point, you have to check that baggage. And a lot of bad players or less players don't check that baggage, and they're dragging. So in other words, they're not focusing on the good shots. They're focusing on the bad shots.
Right.
How do we get them in a better frame of mindset, if you will, so that they're not doing that?
The question falls in a little bit about what you'd asked him and what he was saying, is that, see, I have a conversation on the golf course, and I try to get some of my players to think the same way, is that my question is what would my caddy say right now? If I was paying a caddy like the tour players do, what am I paying them to do? pay them to carry my bag, have all the stuff there. But what they're basically in a place to try to help me get to that positive point before I make this golf swing. So what I always ask, if I'm debating on what to do, I say, well, what would a caddy tell me to do here? What would they tell me to do? And you see it a lot more now because they're getting into the interaction with the player and the caddy on tour. You can hear them talking about, what would my caddy tell me? That's how I would try to encourage the amateur player to get away from the baggage, is that my caddy is not going to let me dwell on that. I'm paying them good money for them to not let me go back to that shot 3 holes ago. Mm-hmm. And so what would my caddy tell me to do? Well, this is this shot right here. Golf is a unique sport. We turn the future into the past every time we swing a golf club.
Yeah.
Nothing we can do about either side of that swing. Can't do anything about the one that comes after it. Can't do anything about the one we just hit. It's about the one I'm about to make. And that is a really hard conversation to have with yourself because, we get out there and we don't want to make the same mistake again. But I think if you start having an internal, you're talking about that internal conversation, is that don't have it with yourself, have that conversation with your caddy. What would they tell you to do? Because they're basically sitting on the outside of this action. They're a spectator looking from the outside in. So they can, that part of your mind or your thought process can kind of be like it's watching what you're doing and giving you advice based on what that sees versus what you're feeling. And if you can ever get to where you got that conversation going, you're going to play a lot of good golf. You're still going to make some bad swings, but you're going to be playing well. I think Hogan was one of we want to talk about ball striking. Yes, he was one of the best. There's a lot of good ball strikers, but there's very few good players. Very few good players. And you look at the weekly tournament on tour. They're all good ball strikers. I don't know one of them out there don't hit it good. But from week to week, they play better. Maybe the course fits their game better. They have a better playing plan for this course versus the other one. So their ball striking doesn't change that much. It's how they're playing. And Hogan was one of the best players because he could take what he had that day and make it work. And that's the definition of a good player right there. Take what you got and make it work. And
I always go back.
If you have that conversation with yourself, be it the caddy versus the player, you can find your way to that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I always go back to something that you always say, Clint, and that is, you can't change the past. The future hasn't happened yet. There's only now. And
there's only now.
That's right. That's a lot of the problem I think that many amateurs have, and even occasionally some pros fall into this trap as well. Especially if they've had a string of bad holes, sometimes it can carry into their psyche and that. But I think today's players have learned to overcome that in most cases. But you're exactly right. You can't change. Even the last shot. The last shot has happened. Maybe you've been put in a bad position. So now you have to focus on, okay, what do I need to do with this shot? How do I, if you're, not in a good spot and you need to get it back in play, it may not be going for the green. It may be laying up to that good yardage that you have, maybe at 100 yards or whatever it is. And that might be the smart play. So you have to focus on that. It doesn't matter that you hit a bad shot off the tee. It's irrelevant. It's already happened. It's gone. You can't change that. And we don't know what's going to happen yet. And as you said, the future shot then becomes the past. So again, when you look at things from a different, I think a lot of it boils down to confidence. Really boils down to, and Tim certainly feel free to chime in. I think it's attitude. I think the attitude that you bring to the golf course helps you understand and put yourself in a position. If you're coming with an attitude, it's just not going to happen. I mean, I played this course, a week ago, and this happened and that happened. And as I said, you've got 3 bags of luggage that you're bringing to the first tee. You're not going to play very well. You've already set yourself up for failure. So attitude is a lot to it. And if you go, I mean, think of all the tournaments. Again, if we look at any player on the PGA Tour, even Tiger, with as many events that he's won, there's many more that he lost. If he went to every new tournament and said, well, you know what, I won 12 events this year, but I lost 30, so I haven't got a hope in heck of doing anything at this event because my percentages or my odds are I'm going to lose, he would have never won a tournament. Right. So attitude, I think, is everything, helps define that. Tim, what do you think? And then, Clint, you're welcome to add to it as well.
Yeah.
There's no doubt to me that attitude sets the tone for what we're about to accomplish, and you know, we can talk as much about confidence as we want. We can talk about as much about belief as we want, and to me, again, belief is arguably the single most important quality for success. But without a good attitude, it's almost like, you know, we have several tools that we teach as part of our program, and one of them, of course, is the breath. The other is using the eyes very properly. Posture is important. A little smile helps, and all those are physiological things that we can do. But I'm here to tell you, you know, it's my firm belief that with a bad attitude, those are just like Band-Aids that are never really going to work. And the breath is a very powerful tool, but with a bad attitude, it's just not it's not going to help you much at all. And so, yeah, attitude to me is flat out absolutely everything, and really sets the tone for qualities such as belief and confidence and the things that we want to be able to tap into.
You know, and Clint, just to back up a little bit further, great point, Tim, thank you. You know, to what you said earlier about John Rahm, really this sort of fits the bill right here as attitude, because, again, as I pointed out in the beginning, it was just really to set the framework, but you know, he could have very easily developed a bad attitude because of what happened to him at the Memorial, but instead he didn't allow that message, that negativity, if you will, to creep in, and actually used it as a propulsion, if you will, coming into the U.S. Open. So again,
nothing he could do about it.
Right, because it's over.
That's right.
Right. Any final thoughts on attitude that you want to add in there?
I think that the attitude is one thing, but the thing that, you know, I was always would go back to the earlier conversation about playing when we were younger against other people, is that I was always taught you can fool other people, but you can never fool yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. And right. You can fool other people, but if you don't believe it and honestly believe it, you might as well just fold it up and go home. And I think that's what you want to use the John Rahm example. He wasn't fooling anybody, and you know he believed it. It wasn't about fooling anybody. It was just absolute. I beat these guys this week. I had a bad thing happen. I just didn't get paid for it, but I'm going to beat them next week, and I know I can. And I'm not fooling myself. I believe it. It's 100%.
Right. It's a genuine level of belief. I agree.
Very good point, Tim. That's a great way of putting it. You're absolutely correct.
It's an authentic level of belief. Right.
That's correct. I agree. I mean, like I said, you can fool other people, but you'll never fool yourself. You either believe it or you don't.
Right, and you know, and that really set the tone for a lot of players. As you know, Clint, as you pointed out earlier, you know, everybody's, you know, that makes it to this level, whether it's the PGA or the LPGA, are all good ball strikers, but there's really very few players. And you know, when you look at a Tiger, when you look at a Nicklaus, and you look at some of the others that really had phenomenal careers. I mean, they've all have good careers. They all make money. They've got sponsors and that. But the ones that really won a lot of tournaments over their career and still are continuing to do so are the real players. They understand. And when you look at most of them, I mean, you know, Mickelson's hit some bad shots. You know, Jack's hit some bad shots. Tiger, we know, has hit some bad shots. They've all hit some really bad shots. I've seen Tiger coming in. You know, I used to laugh, and I've joked about this a few times on the show. I used to laugh when Tiger, in some of his earlier years, and you know, the announcers would come up and say, "Well, you know, how do you feel, Tiger?" And he said, "Well, you know," and he'd win the tournament, of course. And he said, "Well, I didn't really play my A game." And everybody was scratching their head and said, "What the heck are you talking about? What do you mean you didn't play? You just beat the field by 8 strokes, 8, 9, or whatever the case was, and that wasn't your A game." And it's like, and some people, I think, took it as an arrogant statement and saying, "Well, I wasn't really playing that well, but I just beat the pants off everybody out here." But what he was
beat him anyway.
But what he was trying to say is he knows he has the ability. Just like you talked about with your 8-iron, you can hit it 155 yards, but you're not going to hit it there every time. But that doesn't change your attitude. You're going to go out there and you're going to do the shot that you're going to have at that particular time. And it goes to really what a lot of these players, I think, if they come in with a different attitude and not focus. I mean, I see so many guys over the years that tinker with their golf swing. And they had a great swing to begin with. Now, Tiger did that too, and it worked well. But there were a lot of people. Look at Nick Faldo. I mean, he was obsessed with his golf swing for a number of years. Even after he worked with Ledbetter and had a great golf swing and won, 6 majors plus.
Right.
So, it had nothing to do with ball striking, but somewhere along the line, Ian Baker Finch was another great player. Played extremely well, and then all of a sudden, it wasn't his ball striking suddenly stopped or his putting suddenly stopped. It was what was going on inside.
Well, the thing of it is, you get to a point to where you're hitting it as good as you can. So there's a decision you have to make. Am I going to stay focused on what I've been working on, or am I going to change and learn how to use what I have? And we all work with people that need to do both. Some people need to make their swings a little better physically. But a lot of the folks we work with really need to shift gears, move away from that, and get into learning how to play. And you talked earlier about preparation for the day. That's preparation for the future. I can't hit it any better. So then how am I going to shoot a lower score? It's not going to be by hitting it better or putting better. It's going to be learning how to use what I have better. That's the preparation to get from the practice tee to the first tee. Everything to deal with how am I going to use what I have today that's going to give me the lowest score. And that's what a lot of amateur players, they never make that step across the bridge from physical to the more of the mind game. They never make it because they never get satisfied with how they think they're hitting it. When they're hitting it just fine, they just don't know how to use it.
Yeah, and just one final point. Right. And just to add one final point, what we often see with a lot of amateur players is when they're not hitting it as well as they'd like to hit it, then they try to buy the game. They're out there, then they're changing their equipment up. And, a lot of times it's not that, or they're trying to find, extra yards somewhere else. And a lot of times end up going in a direction that's really, again, not serving them well. And again, you've got to work. As we age, obviously our distance is not going to be there. And yeah, you can make some minor tweaks in some equipment. Maybe a different shaft flex can maybe help. But again, you're not going to get 30 or 40 extra yards when you're 65 years old compared to when you were 25 years old. It's just not going to happen. I wish.
Tell me about it.
I wish there was. But you know what? So you have to. You have to be smart about it, and it's just interesting when we look at that. Well, great discussion, guys. I think we got into some of the meat, if you will, of confidence, and we, obviously drifted into some other areas as well. And I really enjoyed tonight's Coach's Corner. So, as always, take a moment and just let the folks know if they want to reach out and maybe have some questions or follow-ups with you guys, or maybe they just want to get together and see if you can help them with their game. So, Tim, I'll let you go first, and then Clint.
Yeah, easiest to reach me through the website at peakperformancemindcoaching.com. And we do certify instructors if that's something that, coaches are interested in, and in the concepts that we share. And great show tonight, guys. I really appreciate it. Very insightful, and I think we were pretty much on the same page.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. Clint?
Yeah, great. Tim and Ted, both, it's always a pleasure, and it's been an interesting conversation for sure. You can contact with me Facebook on TGM Golf Academy on Facebook, or The Third Shot on Facebook, or ClintGolf001 @ yahoo.com. Love to hear from you. And this has been one of the more interesting shows we've done over the years, Ted. That was a great conversation, and Tim, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I do too. Thanks, guys.
Well, I appreciate it, and I try to get better with age. My game may not be as good as it once was, but hopefully my chops are. Guys, as always, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend, and we will see you the next time here on Coach's Corner Panel. Thanks, guys, for always bringing your best.
All right.
Sounds great.
You're welcome. Thanks buddy. See ya.
All right, that was Tim Kramer and Clint Wright joining me here this evening on the Coach's Corner Panel. And before I bring on my very special guest this evening, here's a quick message from Golf Tips Magazine.
The following ad is sponsored by Golf Tips Magazine.
Are you tired of being short off the tee? And what about those 3 putts? Forget about it. It's time you got serious about your game. Golf Tips, the most in-depth magazine in the industry. For over 30 years, Golf Tips has delivered expert content such as the latest golf instruction from America's top pros, simple-to-follow practice and game improvement drills, fitness and mental game tips, equipment, training aids, accessory and apparel reviews, golf destinations and travel tips for every budget, and so much more. Don't miss a single issue. Go to golftipsmag.com and subscribe today.
All right, and just a quick side note, if you want to save a little bit off a print subscription, there's a special right now until the end of June. If you enter promo code GolfTips21 at checkout, you will save over 30% off the subscription price, which is normally $14.97 for an annual subscription. Currently, if you enter that promo code, you'll get it for $9.99, and you'll get all of the 6 issues throughout the season. Just visit the website, golftipsmag.com, click on subscribe under the print side, and enter promo code GolfTips21 and save over 30% off. And that goes till the end of June. So you've got a few more days left. And if you've already got a subscription, maybe you know somebody that would like a subscription, you can do that as a gift as well and save a little extra money and gift it to somebody. All right, my very special guest is here and ready to go, and I know he's calling in the wee hours, if you will, over in the UK, so I'm going to make it quick with the introduction here and get him on so we can get into tonight's discussion. Of course, I'm talking about my very special guest, John Taylor. He's a performance psychology expert and Zen golf associate, and with a combination of a lifelong passion for golf and therapeutic practice, John launched What's in the Bag. What's in the Bag provides an innovative approach to performance coaching centered on self-awareness and holistic philosophies. John works with professional sportsmen and women, focusing on mental toughness. Over the past year, since John was on the show, he has qualified as an I3 personality profiling consultant, defining natural strengths and areas of awareness to increase performance. John finished designing and writing the Living in Abundance program through his What's in the Bag. This has gone on to be a proven program that golfers are now benefiting from around the globe. So without further ado, let me welcome my very special guest from the UK, John Taylor. Good evening, John. How are you doing?
Hi, Ted. Good to hear from you again, and a pleasure to be back on the show.
Well, I appreciate it. And, yeah, I've got you. I can hear you quite well. Hopefully you can hear me as well. So it's been an interesting year, to say the least. There's been a lot, obviously, has gone on globally with the pandemic, and it's been pretty difficult for a lot of folks for a long time, and obviously some have gone through some very, very difficult times. And, you know, this is really, we've been very fortunate in the golf industry, despite some of the challenges over this last year. Golf has actually seen quite an uptick in people not only playing, but coming to the game just by virtue of limitations and things like that. So, you know, what we've all tried to do in the industry is to keep ourselves busy, not just teaching and coaching and things like that, but updating our skills and doing different things, which we'll talk about some of the things that you've done here in just a moment. But first thing I want to talk about, one of the interesting points that you put together and something that you worked on with Dr. Joe Parent, who is, of course, part of the Zen Golf platform as well, and that is you call it the TrackMan for the Mind. Talk about a little bit about that, something you've just recently worked with through him. Talk a little bit about what you mean by the TrackMan for the Mind.
Before I get started, I'd just love to pay a compliment to Clint and Tim and their comments on really exactly what I do for a profession. And Dr. Joe sends his best as well, and I know that you've had him on the show. And as you know, I reached out to Dr. Joe a couple of years ago, and we started to work together, and he's now mentoring me through my work and expressing sort of our desires and goals and aspirations to the world. And I spoke to him last week, and I was like, I'm going back on Ted's show. What do you think we could talk about? And he come up with this idea of TrackMan of the mind, and I was like, okay, that's quite interesting. So I started to do a little bit of research on the back of that and realised that the TrackMan that everybody knows in golf, it's just sitting there as a monitor, measuring people's performance from a practical point of view. Now, if you can translate some of the language that the TrackMan gives you, it's looking at like launch angles, the attack, the spin. Now, golfers launch themselves into the situation unprepared at many occasions. And you mentioned about preparation before. They haven't done their practice. They haven't worked on the mental side of the game away from golf so that they can bring all those things that they've learned onto the game. And when you look at the spin ratio, think about your head starts to spin. So I was like, we're on to something here. And it was just a conversation that we had. And I think that it's just the work that we're doing is really, it's like TrackMan for the mind. It's helping people reduce that spin a little bit rather than and increase it for whatever it needs to be. And looking at how people measure their situation from a physiological point of view and a mental perspective. And the way that you can do that really is just by understanding, firstly, the awareness of where you're at, the positioning. And I think one of the guys mentioned it before, like the power of now. Now, the monitor is just now. It's just observing. It's not really doing much. It's just looking out and then feeding back information. And you can do this with your thought process. You can look at how you respond to situations rather than how you react. And John Rahm responded amazingly, didn't he? He absolutely, you can't get a better response than from what he done. And he wasn't he was hurt. You could see emotionally it hit him. But he went away and probably he didn't dwell on that information. He just sat and probably reflected on how he could just take that time and them moments to come back a stronger person and show that resilience and go out and do what he done a week later or a couple of weeks later. Looking at just really speaking the language of the golfer, of understanding this is what we do as mental coaches around the world, is that we are offering something that measures how you respond and how you adapt yourself in situations. So that's how it unfolded, really.
And that's why I used him as an example. That's why I wanted to bring him out in the open like that, because again, so many people that don't have his understanding of his own self and his own game under similar circumstances. I mean, that was certainly again, it was beyond his control. I mean, it's not like he went out there and his play was not good that day. I mean, he was leading the tournament by I believe 6 strokes at the time. So he was well in a position to win that tournament. So it wasn't his physical game that was letting him down. It wasn't even really his mind game or emotional game that was letting him down. There were circumstances that were really beyond his control. So there was really no reason for him to be upset or angry. Certainly disappointed. Anybody would be disappointed. And, people say, well, it was a lot of money to lose. Well, listen, these guys are dealing in some big numbers that you and I probably don't have the pleasure of dealing in. So, I mean, it was a lot of money, but he's won before and he's earned a lot of money before. So, it was a little dent in his pocketbook, but that's not really, something to be upset about beyond what needed to be, because again, it was not through his own problems that caused this. It was just an unfortunate thing. He happened to test positive, and he had to abide by the rules, and it is what it is. And like you said, he moved on and ultimately won this last weekend's U.S. Open. It's interesting when we look at, John, when we look at the amateur player compared to the professional. And as you were pointing out, and Clint pointed out, you can't change what's happened, in the past. We don't get a do-over. In other words, the closest thing that we have in golf to a do-over is a mulligan. And beyond that, we just have to accept, okay, that was a bad shot or that was a bad round. I can only focus on now because the future hasn't happened yet. And a lot of people struggle with that. As I used the analogy earlier, and I want to get your thoughts on this real quick and then we'll move on, is, I equate it to, as I've said in the last segment, is to being at an airport with people dragging their baggage along. That's the appropriate area to bring baggage because you're going on a trip. But on the golf course, you don't want to be bringing your emotional baggage out on the golf course because that's going to affect you. How do we work with players to get them to separate that and put that in the compartment where it needs to be and be able to focus on what they should be focusing on? What are some things that you do?
It's a great question, Ted. So some of the things that I work with golfers of different abilities, I've worked with guys off +5, scratch, 28 handicappers, and they all come with something. And you mentioned a lot of things around goal setting before. Now, I met a guy about 6 months ago on a Zoom call on a networking event. He's from Canada. Keith Engelhart, he's called, and he says, John, the thing is about goals is that they're probably somebody else's. They lead to disappointment. You set expectations too high, and then you get lost in translation. But if you set intentions and align them with your core values, you've got more chance of succeeding or being successful in the thing that you desire. Now, it's up to you what you put in your suitcase, how heavy you want to make that. You've got choice. And however you want to drag that suitcase through the airport, or how much equipment you want in your bag, or how much you want to bring on the golf course with you, fundamentally goes with the kind of information that you're taking on and disjointing or discarding with yourself. Now, being completely aware of, you want to be taking the right equipment, you want to be taking clean, looking fresh, and flushing out all of the noise and the distractions of things like comparing yourselves with a professional golfer when you're an amateur, like thinking that you should be hitting greens in regulation and 2. Now, you've got shots. Well, why do you need to be trying to bomb it? And you're going to be wasting all of your energy in that round looking for golf balls. I played golf with a guy a couple of weeks ago. Every time I played golf with him, he hits his driver and he's never on the fairway. And the course that we play is reasonably small. And the last round we had, we started using a 5-wood off the tee. But he was bombing it down the middle, and he was actually hitting greens in regulation, and you could actually see the energy release from him because he felt better, because he was in play. He was more relaxed, and he got to then go through his round of golf rather than burning all of that unwanted baggage or energy of constantly being in the trees or in the rough or out of bounds or wherever he may be. And I said to him, stick to that then, and then you'll see your scores start to reduce, because you don't want to be spending too much time away from the centre of the target. You want to be with the people that you're playing with. You want to be in the game. You want to be submerged as much as possible. So it's understanding that, okay then, if I'm hitting my drive off left and right all the time, is that one thing that I could take out my bag for now so I could just start to feel better? And that's going to create the results. And so that's sort of like what we do. I just work with people and understand what they're bringing to the table and what's useful and what's not, and flushing out all of the old.
What's interesting, John, is so many, particularly amateur golfers, and there's been a few pros over the years too that have, on some level, fallen into this trap. But they get cluttered. Their minds get cluttered with so much information that they're just not able to focus on what they need to and decipher what they need to. And, they end up, as I said, bringing all this baggage. And it's just interesting, when we, as teach professionals, when we work with them and, we're trying to get them to focus on one thing and they're talking about 20 other things that they want to do and that. And so I know you can tell by looking at that there's a glazed look over their face when they're trying to focus on what you want them to focus on, because I know in the back of their mind they're thinking about these other 20 things, which they don't need to. And it's very challenging sometimes to get them to refocus that energy. And, you raised a great point in talking about the gentleman that you were playing with when he finally realized that, hey, I need to maybe hit a 5-wood instead of the driver. He noticed a surgence in his game. So I want to move on, because I mentioned, John, that in the opening comments that you recently qualified as an I3 personality profiling consultant, and are now able to help golfers become aware of their strengths and areas of awareness, and helping them transfer it out onto the golf course. And there's 7 indicators through this program. Maybe you can touch a little bit on each of those.
Yeah, the I3 profiling was designed by a couple in the mid-90s, actually in South Africa, and they worked in a church, and there was people coming to them with all of these problems, and they started to realize that they were portraying these indicators, that there were certain traits of making them feel a certain way. Now, the guy who created the I3 profiling is actually a PGA swing coach in South Africa. And his son, Grant Henderson, now ex-professional rugby player, is now the ambassador and the director of the company. And I wasn't aware of this when I actually embarked on doing the training. And some of the indicators that we're looking at are like perceiving, practical, inquiring, promoting, enterprising, organising, and responding. Now, what happens is you do a psychometric test, and then it spits out the results and gives you at the top of your chart where your optimum growth is. So the areas that you are more suited to take on any situation, regardless of what you're trying to accomplish. And if you're high in perceiving, you're looking through your eyes, and we use different body parts as well. So if you're practical, you're hands-on, inquiring, you're living the mind a lot. So an example of an inquiring golfer would be Bryson. So deep thinker,
right.
Always want to make sure that things are bang on, but with each indicator you get the positive and negatives that come in them as well. So if you're too high in an inquiring person, you might delay in creating an opportunity or results until you've got all the facts. So you could be withheld from that. People high in promoting, they like to use their voice a lot, and they're motivational speakers, and they're quite expressive with their words. Entrepreneurial type people is the enterprising. Organising sort of speaks for itself, or you're good at taking on information and then delegating that information outward. So a really good team manager would be well in organising. Now, what I started to realise is when I was taking golfers through these different personality profiles is that we could adapt their natural strengths into their game and sort of look at the areas that they weren't so good at, and you don't necessarily have to build on them. It just means that you just aren't good in that area. So it doesn't mean that you haven't got the strengths. It's just aware of, if you spend too long at the bottom end of your chart, then you're not going to be able to fire on all cylinders and perform to your best. So it's really interesting, the dynamic and how you can look at that. And I think the guys mentioned it before as well, is that when you've got one golfer who's the centre of attention, who, transitioning from amateur to elite status or wants to get onto the professional tour, whichever level, they all come their own set of filters, beliefs, values and emotions to do that. Now, if they understand what their indicators are, then you can really build on them and understand that if they're not so good in other areas, the people in the team can look after that area for them. So it's complementing the yin and the yang along the way. And having somebody who's skilled within the team in their specific or their area of expertise is only just going to complement that golfer. And that's what I say to people when I work with them. You spend 8 hours on the putting green with your headphones in, by yourself, isolated, doing all the hard work behind the scenes. I sit and spend 8 to 10 hours a day working on psychology. So I can help come and complement that area. You don't necessarily have to know everything about how the mind works. You just have to work with you so that we can draw out the natural ability within you so that you can go off and perform. And that's how the I3 works, and it's great fun. I've actually profiled Dr. Joe and many other people around the world as well. And it's just a nice awareness tool to look at yourself and hold that, that mirror up and say, okay, then what is really going on for me? So therefore I can be my best. So that's sort of like the indicator in brief.
Yeah, and obviously I know you could get into more in depth, and obviously that's something that we'll let the listeners that want to reach out to you, they can get a better understanding of that through you personally. But that gives us kind of an overview, and I appreciate that. And you're exactly right. I think once we understand certain things, certain triggers, and certain things that happen, as Clint talked about as well, having developing goals and a plan, if you will. A lot of times having a better understanding of yourself right from the get-go helps you formulate those plans that are going to be more effective and more efficient. What happens with a lot of golfers is they put very lofty goals or plans up there on the board, if you will, and they don't really have the ability to achieve them. So they're, as I mentioned, they're sort of setting themselves up for failure right from the get-go. So I think having something, what you're just suggesting here, indicators that you can use to sort of gauge where people are and the various different components gives it a little bit of an easier time for people to understand where they're at, where they're going, and what they need to work on. And I think this is where the mind game, if you will, really needs to come into play. I want to move on to something I found really interesting in your notes that you sent to me, and you wanted to talk about what you refer to as total embodied meditation and humanistic awareness of your space. I found it very interesting. And you gave an example. You said this is something that Phil has been, and of course talking about Phil Mickelson, has been talking about over the past couple of months. And you're suggesting that you think that this is what's really helped him with his game, and ultimately went on to win the PGA Championship. First off, talk about what you're referring to. What does it mean by total embodied meditation and awareness of your space, if you will? What are you referring to? What was he talking about, and why do you think it helped him?
Yeah, it's a point that I wanted to raise because it's what Phil done is a walking advert for the work that I'm doing with people. Now, to become aware of your perceptual space means that you're not then distracted by what is without you. So there's an article that I wrote was to go within to win. So it's everything that you do from within, and how you vibrate outwards will create the desires and the aspirations that you want to achieve. I've got into the TEM stuff. The founder of that is a guy called Richard Haidt, who's over in California on the West Coast. And I was hooked by this program that I've done for about 6 months, and I used to go and do meditation with him every day. And he talks about your peripheral vision. So if you put your arms out, behind you, and then bring your fingers into a certain point. As soon as you see your fingers, when your arms are stretched out, is your peripheral vision, and then the same above your head and in between your legs when you bring your arms down. And that is your space. That is your awareness. And when I watch golf, I don't watch where the ball's going. I don't necessarily look at the scores, but I watch the players. And Phil was like iron. He was absolutely solid over them putts when he won the PGA Championships. He was so present and still and calm, and within that moment of just that his awareness of just where he was, not what was going on beforehand, not what was going on, what's about to happen, just completely that nowness. And that's what TEM is. It's the total, you're embodied to that situation at that given moment throughout the whole round, and being relaxed and calm and composed, and that's the kind of things that breeds confidence, because you're not then being distracted by things that go wrong as well. So you are being able to reset yourself when things don't go to plan, and how you respond. Right. And that's what TEM brings. And it's a discipline. It's something you have to practice away from the game. And you can do this by walking meditation. You can do it by sitting up. And there's different forms of meditation that you can do. But the best thing is how you then listen as well to what's being said without trying to come up with an answer and being too far ahead in your own mind. And just learning just to relax and understand that you are there having fun in a tranquil environment. There's beautiful things to look at. You know, there's plenty to do on the golf course as well as just play the game. Because to actively stay focused for the 4 to 5 hours you're out there can burn a lot of energy. And you can relax between in and out of pre-shot routines. And once you've played your shot, there's no need to stay, you know, like completely fixated and focused. You can just step in and out of this awareness of space and just know that you are present. And that's what TEM brings. So once I get people loosened up a little bit and we've had a couple of sessions, and I'll start to introduce it, you know, at the stage where I feel they're ready for it. And then they go off and practice, and then they come back and we reflect on how it's been. I get them to do it when they're in the car or when they're at work or when they're talking to their family and they're just around friends. Just practice being in awareness, so therefore that when you get on the golf course, your mind is already trained to be receptible to that way of thinking, rather than trying to do it on the golf course all of the time, because when you're on there, you don't want to be practicing too much. You just want to be out enjoying yourself and playing.
Right, exactly. Very interesting. Interesting perspective on and take on Phil. And you actually went on to talk about, as you put it, the old timers are certainly winning on tour, and you also talk about how some of the younger players can learn from their methods. And you're not just referring to Phil, of course. You mentioned Casey, Westwood, and Sink as an example, and that sort of has created a ripple effect, if you will. Talk about really a little bit about, again, we're seeing a lot of some of the older players coming back, like Phil, obviously, as an example, but others as well that are winning. What is it that they're doing, and what is it that the younger players can basically pick up from them?
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it, Ted, this year that we've been through that situation, and people have, you know, like Lee Westwood, the advocate of a golf course close to me, close house, followed him for a very long time. Phil doing what Richard Bland, you know, 478 starts in the European Tour and not one victory. The oldest first-time winner on the tour. And then Phil complimenting him to do that. And then what that does, I think it just creates that inspiration to know that if you're looking up and to these guys like these guys did to the players before them, like Jack and Arnold Palmer and everybody else around them, and we all feed it down in a message like, you know, Phil with John Rahm, and so it's been a good week for them two guys, hasn't it, over the last few weeks, you know, working together on what they're doing. I think what that does is like when Richard Bannister wrote the 4-minute mile, or Roger Bannister wrote the 4-minute mile, it sends an energy frequency or wave across people's psyche to think that, okay then, if somebody else is capable of doing it, I'm going to find a way within me to then go off and do the same. And I think that's what this has done with these guys. They're like old wines, aren't they? They're just maturing with age, and it just proves that it doesn't matter about where you are in life. Well, I'm 43 now, and I'm really just starting the psychology at a deeper level after, you know, 15, 20 years of training in this environment. So it's just becoming better at what you're doing and being inspired and understanding that you're completely different from everybody else. But I just love it. I just love to see it happening. The younger guys should be looking up at them and saying, okay, what do I need to learn from this? You know, what is it that they're doing that I could bring to the modern game? And they're probably staying off as much as social media is good, but they're probably withdrawn themselves a little bit from that. And I think Phil mentioned the lead up to the US Open where he's going for some quiet time. and not being bombarded, like you said before, Ted, with so much information coming in. It's like we're constantly trying to download all of this, how to hold the club, how to stand, how to be, instead of just trying to do all the time, just be who you are. That's why we're human beings, not human doings. So I just think that what them guys are doing are really creating that, I think, next wave of goodness with a mental attitude, It's fab to see.
Well, and I think, John, also too, what we're seeing as human beings, as we evolve, I think people are putting things in perspective. When you look back to some of the older golfers, and I'm going back to the Nicklaus and Palmer era as an example, their way of thinking, for the most part, not every case, but for the most part, was they spent hours on the range. They were spending every 24/7 was entrenched in golf. And Nicklaus was interviewed recently, on Father's Day at the U.S. Open, on I believe like a Skype call with his son and grandson, and he talked about, for him, what was really important, and both of the young men, of course, concurred, was really family time. I mean, obviously he loved playing the game, and he saw the results, but being a good dad and being a father was important. And I think what you're starting to see with some of the older golfers is they're starting to find balance in their life, and not just. I mean, obviously they don't need the money. I mean, someone like Mickelson, is well off, and many of the others that you mentioned as well. But I think it goes beyond that. I think they're realizing that, by finding balance, by unplugging from some things and just relaxing, is helping them to actually be more focused when they get back out on the golf course. They're taking more time on. They're unplugging from, social media, and they're not getting bombarded with as much information. And they're able to focus on the things that are important to them, which, again, translates to, success out in the golf course. I mean, here's somebody, Mickelson, is older than a lot of the guys out on tour, and he comes out and puts together some great rounds to win the PGA Championship. The oldest player to win a major. That's unheard of. The last guy to do that was Nicklaus. So you're seeing a trend now, I think. Would you agree, as you pointed out, with the more mature golfers, that they're starting to view things a little bit differently than maybe what golfers of an earlier generation might have? What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Ted. I think they become less fixated on the results, and that was mentioned in the coach's corner with Clinton Tim. Mm-hmm. A lot of golfers see these numbers and they're just chasing and chasing and chasing. Now, when the word chasing means what you're trying to get gets further away. It says it in the words.
Yep.
I'm pushing for victory, so you're pushing away. And language is really powerful, both internally and externally. And they find now that they're in this rhythm of flow, this natural. They're blessed to be out there. They're relishing it. They're just taking it all in. They're soaking in every part of what they can just physically do in their moments, and they're not getting lost in translation anymore. And I think because of what is going on in the world, that's quite easy to do. I was talking to somebody about doing meditation. They were like, well, I do meditation at 7:30 every morning till 8 o'clock. And I says, okay then, so what happens when you finish meditation? He says, well, I pick up my phone and I go on social media, or I'll look at my emails. So they're breaking the state. It's not like, right. It's like this kind of stuff that we practice from a mental perspective. It's entwining this whole balance into your life. It's about, you can be awake and alive and in a meditative state without having to sit there on a cushion with your back straight and your arms in front of you. It doesn't have to be that way. You can be relaxed and calm and composed in any given situation. I think that's what the older guys and some of the younger players as well are really starting to take heed of that and understanding that that's something that they can do as well. And some of these traditions that I'm talking about now are like 4,000 years old, so they're not new. They're not new to the world. It's just have you got the discipline to, block out that noise and spend a little bit of time away from too much. If you do too much of the same thing, it's the definition of insanity, isn't it? So repeat the same pattern and expecting a different outcome. The spice of life is variety. As much variety. Myself and my partner, we ran a resilience program with 16-year-old college students who were going into employment, and we ran this trial with them, and we've done a 6-week program around emotional development. And one of the things that we looked at was we put all these different types of emotions up on the screen, and their feedback was that they realised that the more that they can manage their emotions and have more variety in their life, the better they are at managing them. So I was like, well, that makes sense. And this comes from 16-year-old kids. It's understanding that you want to be as open-minded as possible, and just allow things to just pass through you sometimes, and don't hold on to things because they'll just. It's like the unblocking method, And one of the exercises that I do with students when I work with them is I look at all of the things that they don't like about themselves, and then all of the things that they've achieved, and then we set intentions on the back of that. Because if you just go bullying in with, just be positive and set these goals, but like, well, deep down inside, I'm not really positive, and I haven't got this belief that I can do something. Well, it's like, well, let's work on that first before we start adding stuff to the pot. And I just believe that that's what they're doing. The older guys are just relishing in their moments. And congratulations to Katie as well. He's just been the Olympic team. And Bubba Watson just had a great run today as well, hasn't he? So it's just proving that I think the more you can just distract yourself from the chaos, as I call it, the situation, and just be okay with who you are in your own skin, it's gonna give you another little tool in your box to help you push forward.
Well, and that goes to what we talked about in our earlier discussions on Coach's Corner about that, and you mentioned as well, in that internal voice, internal dialogue. Too often, I remember hearing a story a number of years ago, and actually somebody brought it to the other show that I do, and they talked about shared a story about Annika Sorenstam, and before she had won the U.S. Women's Open, and one of the things that she had was a lot of clutter in her mind, and she wasn't really able to relax. She was thinking about every shot on the golf course and constantly, and not giving herself a break. And somebody suggested to her, as an example, they said, well, Annika, you've got this new home now, and you've got this home and you want to, renovate your kitchen. And, they said, well, why don't you think about, when you're in between shots, instead of thinking golf, give yourself a little bit of a break. And, maybe think about something that you want to do in the kitchen, or a pattern, or whatever the case is, to just take your mind out of the moment and just, walk, to the next shot and just enjoy it. And what was interesting is she followed and took that to heart and did just that, and ultimately went on to win the tournament. And it just goes to show that, the internal dialogue, sometimes if you're constantly ingrained in negative thoughts and negative, again, not feeling confident or that you're going to be able to succeed at something, whenever you're faced with a task from that point on, it's very hard then to be expected to succeed at that task, because you've already set yourself up for failure, because you've been playing that message in your mind. And that's what happens with a lot of golfers. That's why I used the reference, several times earlier about, the airport and bringing the baggage, that emotional baggage, is that's what many amateurs do, is they're bringing not only past holes, but past rounds into the current round. And so, and you talk about here in some of your notes about really letting go of the results and becoming more grounded to the now, and that if you sort of set your intentions in line with your core values, you stand a better chance of getting the results that you desire. And, I think that's part of the problem that so many golfers have, is they're focusing on too many different things, and that negative internal dialogue just keeps playing. It's like a record that just keeps playing and playing and playing. And I think that what you're doing. Yeah, you know what I mean. What you're doing here. I also want to give you an opportunity, something very interesting as well that I noticed that I know you wanted to talk about is a gentleman by the name of Wayne Telfer. Tell me who he is and how he's now connected with you.
Yeah, certainly. But quickly, Ted, I just, the baggage stuff, when you look at an amateur golfer, they've got a rangefinder, they've got a watch on, they're pulling out their phone, they get a Facebook notification, or they answer the phone during the round and you're about to play your shot. And please, for anybody out there playing golf, put them in your bag. Just put them away. You're out there for the 4 hours. For me, when I'm playing golf, and especially when I'm working with people, they get my 100% focus. They get all of me. And when I'm out playing golf, I give all of the game to myself. It's the opportunity. We've been starved of it. We've got the summer here in the UK at the moment. It's going to get, we're past half the year. It's going to start getting darker again. We won't be able to play as much. It's like, just take that opportunity to. There's nothing happening away from golf when you're playing your game that's going to change in them 4 hours, unless you wait for a baby to be born or an important phone call. I understand that, but my message is to golfers out there is, if the technology is distracting and it's too much for you, and you're playing off whatever you are, and you've got your rangefinder, you're trying to get it within 2 foot of the pin, it's like, take the green. You've got, just calm down a little bit. And I think that that's in the suitcase as well, isn't it? That people bring. It's just like, stop it. It's just like, come on, guys and girls. You're out there. You took this game up. The industry's grown massively in the last couple of years, which is a massive bonus for everybody involved with it, which is a relief because it was on a decline. Just that etiquette of being out there and playing and being, it's the love of the game, it's the sport, and that's, when you're passionate about something and you're seeing people with these phones and devices and just it's confusing, I think, but some people like it, some people don't. I'm not saying it's all bad, but just be mindful of what is distracting you from your baggage. So I just had to quickly get that one in. My message to everybody.
I agree. Just real quick to add on to that, John, is you're exactly right. I see a lot of players, a lot of amateur players out there that are not very good players, and they've got surrounded by all kinds of technology, and they wonder why they're not really out there. And I always equate it to this. If I'm coming out there and depending on where you're playing, you could be spending anywhere from, $30, $40, $50 or $100 a round, depending on where you're playing. If I'm spending money and I'm going to be spending 4 hours, I don't need to be looking at my phone. I don't need to, and again, I'm a supporter of technology. If you want to have a rangefinder, if you feel you need it, that's fine. But again, be cognizant of, conscious of what's going on around you. But I just want people to go out and have fun. And, there has been, since this pandemic, there's been a big influx of new people coming to the game that have never played before. The last thing I want to do is be bombarding them, from within the golf industry and say, well, you got to have this, you got to have that, and you got to do this, to the point where they say, you know what, this is just too complicated. It's, golf's meant to be fun. It's challenging, no doubt about it. It's one of the most challenging games out there. But it can be a lot of fun, even for players that are not very good at the time. Part of the challenge is to obviously improve yourself, and there's a lot of ways that you can do that. And we talked about them earlier on the Coach's Corner in order to build confidence. But the main thing is we want you to go out there and have fun, because if you're not having fun, who the heck wants to play it? Why do you want to play something if you're not enjoying it, having fun? And if you're too wrapped up in everything else that's going on around you, and I think that's really the point that you were making earlier with a lot of these more seasoned players, is they're starting to recognize that. They're going out there having fun, and they're competitive still, and they can bring the best there, but they're not really focusing on the same things that they maybe did 20 years ago. I guarantee that what Phil's focusing on now on the golf course is light years different than what he was when he first came out on tour. I guarantee it, without even having to ask him. And that's the thing, is it comes with maturity, it comes with experience and so forth. And I think the younger players are saying, hey, you know what? Hey, if a guy as old as Phil can come out here and and perform to the level that he did, there must be something to it. So we're going to see, I'm sure, more of that as time goes on. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but go ahead and talk to us a little bit about Wayne and the relationship there.
So myself and Wayne reached out to me, and I think it was at the start of the I call it the situation. I don't give it the energy, but the thing we've just been through. Wayne reached out to me. He plays at Royal Portrush. He played on the Euro Pro. He's mid-30s now, and he just said, "John, I love what you're doing." There's 2 courses at Portrush. He's got the course record on one, and McIlroy's got it on the other, and Rory. So he had the same string coaches, Graham McDowell and things like that. No Shane Lowry's. But he just said, "I wish I had somebody like you, John. Because I believe I just didn't have the temperament." And so Wayne's now really supporting and become a big advocate and an ambassador for me personally and what I'm doing, and just sending that message out there. So I just want to really thank him for him coming forward and doing that. And he's a great guy. He's a cracking player, and he's wanting to get back out onto the Euro Pro as well. And we're working together to get him, winning again. But yeah, he'll be looking at Phil winning now and Richard Blands and stuff like that as well. And no doubt in his mind that he can go out and compete again. So I just wanted to give him a bit of a shout out. I'm just grateful that he's by my side in this as well. Yeah.
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. So, John, if the folks want to, learn more about what you're doing, I know you've got a website. Why don't you direct them to the website? And there's a lot of great information there. I'm actually looking at it right now. Go ahead and give them that information if they want to reach out and connect with you. The one great thing about being online and different social connections is you can literally connect with anybody from all around the world, just like we're doing tonight. So what's the website? Where can they go to get more information?
Thanks, Ted. The website is whatsinthebag.club, and you can go on there and book a 15-minute consultation or a call with myself and have a look at the things that I've been doing, some of the blogs that I've been writing. I'm on LinkedIn as well, John Taylor, performance psychology expert. It'll come straight up, and that's, I think, we're connected on there as well, Ted, aren't we? So if anybody wants to just have a conversation around how they can just be a better person and then go out and perform. And the word attitude got mentioned before, and I think that's fundamentally important. It's coming with that right behaviour, with the right attitude, and just, like you said, letting go of all of the clutter and the frustrations, and that's where the confidence will build from there. So that's how you can find me.
Well, perfect. John, it's just to reiterate, it's so, as we get older, I'm a little older than you, obviously, but as we get older, we start to look at things, life in general, a lot differently. And I even know with my understanding of golf now, obviously, is much different than what it was 20, 30 or more years ago. And when I go out and practice and play myself, I look at things a lot differently, and I approach it a lot differently, and I don't focus so much on the technique, because I've obviously developed my game to a point where I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable within my own skin, if you will. And, I'm going to hit some bad shots, of course, but I'm going to hit some good shots. And I look at it this way, as I mentioned earlier in one of the comments, referring to Ben Hogan. He was, considered to be one of the best and greatest ball strikers that ever lived. And even he came out and said, in any given round, I'm lucky if I hit 5 or 6 great shots. The rest, I know there are going to be a lot of misses in there as well. So, when you're an amateur golfer out there and you're looking at these guys that are on tour, and we're seeing the edited down version on TV. We're not seeing all the bad. Occasionally they'll throw one up there, but they're showing us a lot of the good shots. These guys have bad shots too, so you have to put it in perspective. And I think that if you're expecting that you've got to have 70% of your shots are going to be great, and the guys on tour aren't even doing that, and they're far better than you and I put together, that should tell you something right there, that you're focusing on the wrong thing, and you're not having fun because you're obsessed with trying to be the perfect ball striker. And as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of guys out there that, and Clint put this point home, there's a lot of great ball strikers out on all of the tours, but there's not a lot of great players. And the great players are the ones like the Mickelsons and past players and that as well, like Nicholas and so forth, that went out and really, set the stage on tour. None of them were fantastic ball strikers, certainly good ball strikers, but they weren't fantastic compared to maybe others. But they knew how to play. They knew how to put the game together, and they had, a good understanding of mentally and what they needed to do to navigate around the golf course. And that's really what we're talking about here in the discussion. But John, I want to thank you. It was a pleasure to have you back on the show, and I'm going to have you back on again on a future show, and maybe we'll get Dr. Joe to come on with you, and we'll have a three-way conversation next time perhaps. But I appreciate you coming on and sharing what you're doing. And again, for those of you that want to check out what John's doing, his website is what'sinthebag.club. That's what'sinthebag.club, and there's information there. You can get in touch with him, and as you said, you can book a free 15-minute consultation with John Taylor, and go from there. And I know he can help you with your game. And John, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming on, my friend.
Thank you so much, Ted. I really relish this opportunity. I know it's getting 2 a.m. in the morning. That's dedication.
So I know. For me, it's just coming up to 8. It's just coming up to 8 for me. So I know that. That's why I wanted to cut you off a couple of minutes early, let you go and get some rest. But John, as always, anytime, I'm glad to have you on the show. And we'll talk again real soon. I've got some other things I'd like to talk to you about, and I think that might be of interest for you. But cheers, mate. Thank you very much for coming on, and God bless you, and keep doing all the great work that you're doing. You're doing a fantastic job, and as always, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much again, Ted, and hopefully we'll have a round at some point when all is chaos. That'll be a dream. Thank you.
I think that would be fantastic. All right, go get some rest, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
All right, that was John Taylor, performance psychology expert and Zen Golf associate. A lot of great information. Again, go to his website, what'sinthebag.golf. All of his information there. You can check out some great blog posts as well, and obviously some of the different programs that he has to offer. You can check them out on his website. Again, a quick thank you to Tim Kramer and Clint Wright. Thanks, guys, for doing a fantastic job on Coach's Corner. And always look forward to our discussions, and I'm glad that you guys enjoyed it tonight. And I think it worked well with tonight's special guest. Was able to just walk right in and continue the conversation. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Again, don't forget, for those of you that want to add a Golf Tips subscription to your repertoire, go to golftipsmag.com, click on subscribe, and go to the print subscription, and you can subscribe now using promo code GolfTipsMag, GolfTips21, and save over 30% off the regular subscription price and get it for $9.99. That's good until the end of this month. So we've got a few more days. And if, as I said, if you're already a subscriber, not to worry. You can also, if you have somebody in mind that you'd like to give them a subscription as a gift, maybe a fellow golfer that's currently not a subscriber and you'd like to do that as a gift, that promo code will work as well. So again, just GolfTips21, do that as you're checking out, and you'll save over 30% off the regular subscription price. All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. I will be back next week with another great round of Coach's Corner, and of course another interesting guest that I'll interview to follow. So God bless everybody. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time right here on Golf Talk Live.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. We'd like to thank this week's Coach's Corner panel, and a special thank you to tonight's guest. Remember to join Ted every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on Golf Talk Live. And be sure to follow Ted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're interested in being a guest on Golf Talk Live, send Ted an email at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.